is the Board of Trustees asked the Advisory Water Committee to do a cost comparison associated with removing lead paint and relining the existing 2 million gallon tank versus buying and installing a second tank up there at the 2 million gallon plant, so we have a place to put water while the original 2 million gallon tank is down, being refurbished. Can we afford to put a second tank up there, let that tank serve the rest of the city? Because if we rely, so there's two pieces here, but let me get to that after Dave kind of gives us his update based on his institutional knowledge, because there's a couple questions that are critical to answering before we decide what's happening with the 2 million gallon tank, 2 million gallon treatment plant. So,
yeah, it's we did it before without a second tank up there, and now twice that I know of, the council's approved a second 2 million gallon tank up there, and the mayor or the town administrator for various reasons is fighting. So we would, as of now, actually have 2 tanks up there if only we have followed through with the rest of the government. And we did it without the extra tank, so it can be done that way, but it would be especially iffy if you did it and the 1 million gallon tank was offline. That's really rolling the dice. So if you do it during high water, I don't think you need another tank, unless it's an exceptionally dry winter and leaves us with no flow going into next year.
when you say a second tank, you mean up at the 2 million?
Yeah, I don't think you need to like rent a small tank or build another tank. We just don't have money. I'll talk about that for building a tank yet. But the state's leaning on us for getting the lead out, and it's time to actually get that thing relined. It's got to be done.
So let me interject one other thing, which is the big question. So we learned that the line, 2-inch line that runs from the 8-inch delivery system coming off the 2 million, the previously existing 2-inch line off the 8-inch line, so we can fill the 1 million gallon tank from the 2 million gallon treatment, is that actually not in place?
It's in place.
Oh, it is in place.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we need,
Yeah.
Dave, hang on a second. Wait, we all need to know that. Because, so it's in place and it's usable. Will we have to spend any money on that line?
I think it's good to go. I'll double check that. I would literally just was with the inspector on the backflow assembly. That's right there. We were just looking at it today.
Okay.
But I've never verified that the line goes to the clock 1 million gallon storage tank.
Okay, because that is the biggest question in my mind that we need to get answered, because we can't fill the 1 million gallon tank if there's not a line.
Well, you can fill it off the springs on that side. Like
But
we're
not ready to start treating water at the clock plant.
So are we on one skid?
We're on 2 at the land.
But I mean, both are up and running?
That landlord, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so that line exists. One thing about that line, I don't know if there's any pressure compensation on it. It's what, like a 300-foot drop or something? I don't even know, it might be more than that. And that's like 150 PSI difference. So and this is what John Norris cautioned me about under threat of impalement, is if I turned off that line at the 1 million too fast, it was going to hammer and explode. So it takes 10 minutes to turn off. So if you've got that line running between the 2 million and the 1 million, it takes 10 minutes to shut it off. Just do a little bit and then go off, have a cup of tea, come back, do a little bit more until it comes down slowly.
So I'm having a tough time. I see you, Phil. Just give me a second. He's like waving at the screen.
Okay.
Can we yield to Phil real quick?
Sure.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Phil.
Okay, so Dave, there's a couple of things on doing things in high flow, which means that we lose our ability for a lot of contact time. The state is going to be on us about making sure that we have enough chlorine contact time. Now, we can certainly bypass the 2 million. If we have enough inflows, that's good for consumptive use. But we have to have enough contact time in those pipelines to make sure that our chlorine disinfection works. And one of the issues is that is a calculation that needs to be done by JDS, Hydro, or somebody, because if we don't, are unable to complete our disinfection requirements, the state's going to come down on us. So I think that's a fairly significant issue. So we need some metrics on that, probably from some smart guys, maybe JD or somebody, to make sure that we can pull that off. Second thing is that my understanding was that there is not a cross connection from Lamborn to the clock tower. If you look on the map, that 2-inch line runs down but does not go into the clock tower. So if we want to take a very risky shot and try and reline this tank all at once and not have the ability to deliver at least 75% of the water to the citizens, I think that's pretty risky, personally.
Yeah, the line comes up on the south side of the 1 million gallon tank. I think someone just needs to turn on both ends and make sure it flows.
Yeah, and just clarify. Okay, yes, the contact chlorine time is important, but I'm hearing two options. One is like using that 2-inch line to go into the 1 million gallon tank, and then we have our contact chlorine time, but we still have to serve Hidden Valley and some other users up there. Mm-hmm. And the conversation has been between SGM and CDPHE on that calculation that you're referring to. And so that conversation stopped in December. And basically, I guess SGM could do the calculation and then CDPHE will approve of it. And what we need to figure out is like, what is that calculation and how much water basically, how much water can Lamborn? Actually, that won't even work. We can't do one. There's a lot of like.
How big a buffer do we need?
We almost need an internal conversation first to get all on the same page, and then we can like hatch out which is the right plan. But basically, the state will tell us how much water Lamborn can produce when we're using the distribution line as our contact chlorine, mm-hmm. or like for contact chlorine time, and then we'll know how much water we have to work with from Lamborn, and then we can determine if we need clock up and running to supply the rest. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, because there's contact time that's in the lines depending upon the flow rate through the line, so you get some of your time there. Yeah. I just don't have a feeling for it. Are they talking like 24-hour contact time? Or?
I don't think that's quite that.
So it's really short?
It's like 1,000 foot of line. Yeah, what's your clarifying question?
Oh. The clarifying question is, are you suggesting that the distribution lines serve as the cleaning and we don't have to rely on the tank for distribution?
To some degree, we don't know how many like gallons per minute the state will say. That's ample, like basically, how do I say this? Like we have to say it's only 100 gallons per minute is enough. Shoot, how the hell do I say this? This is like, okay, so we certainly can't use that strip of pipe for 400 gallons a minute. Maybe it's 100 gallons a minute, maybe it's 50 gallons a minute.
The 8-inch pipe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from Lamborn to the distribution pipe before it hits any of the meters or splits up, okay. Right? Like we need the state to tell us, like, you guys can use this method, but you could only treat, X amount of gallons per minute at a time. Okay. And then that'll tell us
how much you can do directly and how much you have to disinfect in the tank at the 1 million.
Yeah, and then in that scenario, we're not sending water down to clock plant and using that storage tank. Right. Because we're still getting our line.
So you're hoping the line could serve everyone, including the upper users, which is the best.
I don't think it's possible. I think we need clock back online. I think Lamborn can supply Hidden Valley and Lamborn Mesa, and then clock services town.
Everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what you're saying is, you can do contact time in the pipe for Hidden Valley, or you can shunt the water over to a 1 million gallon tank, but you probably can't do both.
Yeah, and then so the issue with putting it down to the 1 million gallon plant is then we don't have any water to service Hidden Valley.
Right. It's too low for a lot of our users.
It's one or the other.
So there's no way to split the difference, to send something to Hidden Valley off of Lamborn while everything else is being supplied through the 1 million.
Well, actually, no. That's another possibility because we do have a T right after Lamborn, and so Yeah, I don't know.
That'd be ideal.
That's a question for an engineer. Can we have, can we send? But then there's all the landborne users, so it gets really complicated, right? Because
Can you pump it back up to the
that was something that we talked about. That was something. Philip, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I don't seem to be able to unmute and get in this conversation. But the town of Paonia is really lucky because we have the clock tower plant, which really represents redundancy in our system. We are so fortunate to have that. So the fact of the matter is that if we have talked about bringing the clock tower online at least for a few months of the year to make sure everything works down there and provides us as a backup, if we were able to shuttle water down to Lamborn, finish that, we can provide almost, I think, 80 or 85%, maybe 90% of the water town out of clock tower.
Yeah.
And what that would do would be to relieve the chlorine requirement from the Lamborn plant. And chlorine disinfection time is basically a flow calculation. How much time is the chlorine residual in the pipeline, right? The pipeline basically is a reservoir. So if 75% of the town's water were provided by finished water from clock tower, we would easily be able to reline that tank and probably take it offline for maybe a couple of months. But if we were going to shoot the moon and try and deliver all the water out of Lamborn during the time, because I can tell you these relining projects, they always go south. They'll tell you 6 weeks, it'll be 8, and it's just the nature of the beast. So my focus is that we should probably slowly bring clock tower online. We should spend a little money to get the cross connection, because it just gives us an insurance policy and a backup so we don't have some disaster again, second time this century.
And Philip, that 2-inch line does absolutely run into the clock plant. Whether it goes from the treatment section to the storage tank, I need to verify, but I absolutely know that 2-inch line runs into the clock plant.
Yeah, it came out of the treated side of the 2 million.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, so what was the issue? We've been hearing about the altitude valve now for a year and a half. And is that the choke point for bringing landborne water down to clock?
I mean, I think it's so that we can run an 8-inch line from distribution, or 6-inch line from distribution into that tank. I don't know. Has anybody calculated how long it would take to fill that tank up with the 2-inch line?
Long time.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we just ran it 24/7 when we needed it, and it helped us out in the 2003 drought, which was the big one, the biggest of the droughts.
Well, and there's been a whole engineering study done with that altitude valve, which I think was supposed to deal with the pressure you were referring to, Dave, about running water from the 2 million treatment to the 1 million tank. And SGM has it all engineered, and have you seen it?
It's a preliminary design.
Okay.
And
but isn't that the purpose?
Well, yeah.
To level out.
It's to let water into the 1 million.
Right.
And then shut off when it doesn't need it.
Yeah.
It doesn't really reduce pressure.
Okay, but I've never heard anybody talking about the pressure being an issue. Is that?
Well, there is a drop between there, like I said.
Right.
If it came off distribution, like what we've seen, then there would be a PRV before that, because there's one not too far from the 1 million plant.
So that could take care of the pressure. And it's pre-existing, if we can get it fixed.
Yeah, it's
one.
probably around 80 PSIs there, so.
If you were going to replace that with an 8-inch line, I'm not sure we got the easements.
So that was the other thing. That's why there's a preliminary design, because we either need to move the easement for that plan or redesign it one more time.
For the altitude valve.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. I mean, technically the altitude valve and the volt is going to go in the same spot, but the line that connects them, either, here or there.
That wouldn't work though, because if it came off our distribution line, we would still have that contact time that needs to be needed before the first half. So it would still need enough contact time because it would be running through our regular distribution line and then splitting off from there.
Are you talking about bypassing the 1 million tank?
No, I'm talking about getting it into the 1 million gallon
Okay.
tank. We wouldn't be able to do that without the 2 million gallon tank still
Right.
for the contact tank.
Unless the 1 million gallon plant is up and running.
Yeah.
And has water going to it, and use that.
Wow.
So
Well,
a
that's
lot of
what you
those
gotta do.
lines,
That's what you're saying.
we have no easements on. They were done on a handshake with some farmers. In some cases, we've only discovered lines when they exploded in some farmer's field, made a geyser. So, we need to check that if you guys are planning on upgrading that line.
Okay, so I have a box upstairs of when they redid a line from Lambourne basically down past Lambourne Mesa Road, like right in front of the clock plant, and there's agreements. There's like a stack of agreements that they have with landowners. So, and I think it covers all the parcels that line goes through.
So what's the first thing we need to get figured out in your mind?
Where the money's coming from?
No, because we can start asking for money, but we have to be very clear about what we're asking it for.
Comment.
Yeah.
Well, at the last meeting, I provided you a number of vendors
Right.
that are in the painting and tank relining business. I think one of the things we need to know is what the proposed costs are going to be. As I said last time, there are some interesting new technological developments in managing lead. And understand that our lead concentration in these tanks is parts per billion. It's extremely small. So I think number one is, anybody have any idea what's going to cost to reline the tanks? Has staff made any overtures to the 4 or 5 vendors provided to get an idea if we had any on-site inspections? Because, and also it's very critical to know what the timeline is going to be. So, I mean, I think until we have an idea of what the costs are and what the timeline is, we're just dreaming, personally.
So, okay, we get clock back online. We see that works, and we drain the tank, and then we fill it with a whole bunch of chlorine, and we drain it again, but we need an engineered design to basically put in a neutralizing tank so that we can actually drain that tank a second time. And I mentioned that to Corinne, and she's putting an RFP out for some engineering work. But I think just like dealing with the water that we can't use in that storage tank and getting clock back online, in all scenarios, we need that back online. We need to be able to like service as much of the town as we can from that storage tank, period, before we can do anything else. I think that's pretty clear.
I agree totally. The town Fairview weather station's in my backyard and weather underground, and we're half normal rain this year. So we're just going to need it, I think, if we have a bad year, if the monsoons don't break on us, we'll need it just to survive through the year.
And you're saying that because of the springs that only fill it, the sources?
Though they're good springs, but they have weak legs. They're going to run out late in the year. It's typically what they do. So.
Right. Well, what I meant was there's some springs that can't be used at the 2 million. They can only be used at the 1 million.
Yes.
Is that your impetus? Okay.
Yeah. No. The 1 million feet's like Phil pointed out, a large percentage of the total number of taps. I mean, they're down lower in the valley. So, except for Stewart Mesa, Lambourne Mesa, Hidden Valley, at the very top end of Apple Valley, you can feed everything else from the 1 million gallon tank. That's why we need it online, because if we're going to have a dry year, that's our buffer. And during 2003, the tank would fill up at night and then start dropping during the day because usage exceeded, the demand exceeded supply. And then it would go ahead and drop a little bit each night. We were watching that thing, and it was like, when do we cross? When does it happen that even with the buffering of the tank filling at night, that we run out of water? And we came real close to the edge. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we've got to have that up online. If we have a dry year, we need it. And then we need it for all the rest of this relining strategy. That's like a pivotal part of what's going on. So that's my priority anyways. I know you guys talk about PRVs and stuff, and altitude valves, but really that one tank is...
Yeah, I think the PRVs are, well, and they're in here, because those have to get done because of the pressure issues throughout our system. But no, that's hopeful because nobody said that. And Barb, you have your hand up?
I do, and it's concerning their discussion and whatnot. I was asked to come to this meeting because a lot of the trustees didn't have any idea. I read the 27 agreements that the town has with the different water companies. And I know at least 3 of them, because I was on the Stewart Mesa Domestic Water Board for years when I lived out of town. It was signed in 1919, and it only allows 2 taps per household, 1 tap being for the house and 1 tap for being for the livestock. And just the 3 miles that I live from here, from our old farm up on Stewart Mesa, there are 8 places that are in total violation of the water agreements that they've signed with the town. And I think someone should read all these agreements and find out which ones change which ones require that 1 tap for house, because I can name another 10, 20 places that have been in violation. Not just the road into Paonia, but places out on Lamborn Mesa with people that have put in hair salons or people that have built Airbnb places. And I would suggest that once this is read and you find out what water companies are in violation, that possibly get a second meter on all these places, which they can pay for out of their own company, and price accordingly. Because everyone, I know we paid more for water when we lived out of town, but even more should be charged for all these second buildings that have domestic water coming to them that the town of Paonia supplies. It's not fair for the people in Paonia to sort of subsidize all these people that have built a second building or done a garage and turned it into an apartment.
And are you suggesting they haven't added more taps, they're just increasing their use on their existing taps? Is that the bottom line?
No, I'm suggesting that you put a second tap on these other buildings that are in violation.
They've added more taps than they're allowed.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
I just wasn't quite sure what the crux of it was.
And I was surprised how many people didn't know about this.
That has been an ongoing problem, and when I was on, we were cutting off the extra use. In other words, what we do, usually a neighbor would actually report them. We'd go talk to them, and if they refused to disconnect the additional unit, since it's in the county, not our jurisdiction, we'd go in with the sheriff and one of the public works guys, dig it up, cut it, and make sure that it wasn't.
But how many times did that happen? I mean,
quite a few, but it's been lax. I agree. The last.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, we didn't have
see
a water
the new
committee to deal
buildings.
with it for most of the
Right, and people say, oh, I drilled a well. Well, if you check the water, especially on Stewart Mesa, it's not well water because the wells go bad. So it's people running lines out to outbuildings and running them out.
The same thing's happening in town. It's not just out of town.
Well, I understand that, but there's an agreement with the town with these water companies. So I really suggest someone reads those agreements and find out which companies are in total violation and go from there.
Yeah, the agreements were superseded by the town water ordinances. A lot of those are no longer functional like the way they were written. Stuart Mesa one's completely different from the original. Stuart Mesa was the original owners of the Paonia water supply.
Yes.
But they couldn't maintain it, so they turned it over to the town under the consideration that they got a special deal on the water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I had back all the agreements from 1919 that they had signed with that, but I'm just here to mention this with all these water companies and how many are in violation of that, which doesn't create a growth in the town of Paonia. It's just putting in more rentals out of town that out-of-towners benefit from.
It sounds like you're making it sound like that they're not paying for the water.
They're paying for the water, but they're doubling the amount. I mean, if you had a meter on Stuart Mesa, just in the 28 years we've lived here, it's probably tripled in use.
But they haven't paid for the extra taps. That's a part of the thing.
Yeah.
And the base rate.
And the base, exactly.
Right, yeah, but,
They pay
and,
per gallon, but they aren't paying into maintenance of the system.
right, exactly. Yeah.
Say that again, Phil?
Yeah, I have a comment. The town of Paonia sells water to, at last count, 27 different entities. 9 of those entities are actually public water companies. I'm the ORC for German Creek Water West Association. And when I took over as the ORC over there, I mandated that we get some GIS, we find out where the meters are, we find out where the lines are. And a couple of things came up in our investigation. First thing was that we couldn't find a formal agreement between the town and German Creek Water Association West about the terms of our purchase of water from the town. It appears that the way it worked in the old days was that we'll just sell you water, we'll come by and read the meter, you send us a check and everything's cool. That's kind of how things work. And so that brings up 2 questions. Number one, for this little association, what about the accuracy of the meters? The meters at German Creek have been in there as near as I can tell for 20 years. I don't have a clue where those meters are accurate or not. They're old and they may be accurate, they may be not. So that's item 1. Item 2 is that all these 9 associations that are associated with buying water from the town have to have an ORC, they have to have water testing, even though we purchase water, it's kind of drag. So one of the issues is that, in my view, the peripheral companies really have not had basically a say, or even if they have one, based on contractual obligations. So, my interest is that we review the contracts, particularly for the public water companies, of which there are 9. Now, the question put away, who was bringing up the issues about apartments offsite and all that kind of stuff. If the town is willing to sell water for money and it's pretty cheap money for the town, you don't have any obligations for meters, you don't have obligations for much of anything, you just set your rate and you sell water for money. It's actually pretty good money for the town, in my view. So if these associations really want the town to become a cop and start looking in everybody's backyard about a grandma house or something like that, it's going to get sort of ugly unless you decide to incorporate these people into the town water system. There's not been much of an interest to do that. So I think in the interim, the question for the town is, are your rates accurate? Are you charging enough for these folks? So that'd be my comment on
Thanks. You wanna take it from here? Mr. Weber?
So, the town water system has two kinds of leaks. There's obviously the H2O leak, which you guys are working on. We have a serious money leak. And I'll give you some numbers here. So our current status first of all, you know how the enterprise fund is and how we've isolated it financially for water, sewer, and trash away from the general fund. The theory, that allows us to not have to do the Bruce Gallagher Tabor stuff where we give the money back to the people when we collect it. And so, because under those laws, if there's excess at the end of the year, we're supposed to refund it to the ratepayers, the taxpayers. But enterprise fund is isolated, ideally.
Didn't we de-Bruce?
Was it Bruce?
Was there an election to de-Bruce?
Yeah.
But the enterprise fund isn't part of.
I know, it's useless because with de-Bruce, you don't have to maintain.
Yeah, we could. That's a solution.
It might be a good idea to do it, but it's not required by law.
But anyways, and this started long before my time, this enterprise fund. And its purpose was to isolate the money. But they've been bleeding it to keep the general fund afloat. We've lost money we used to get from mineral. For 2 of the 3 mines have closed. Mineral and severance money's gone. That was a fair chunk of money. And town has been expanding what it pays. And so as a consequence, it pays for contractors and stuff. So as a consequence, this fund's depleted. Our current status in the water fund, 2022 current to date, we have a negative balance in the water fund of $201,514. What does that mean? Actually, it's not like your bank account. Your bank account goes negative, your checks bounce. It's a little bit different when you're dealing with these funds. Our actual reserve balance is $792,262. That's money like we got in the bank. But we're required by law to maintain reserves out of that. 25% minimum reserve, that's required by the state of Colorado. A 25% O&M reserve based on a 1.25 million capitalization, that's also state requirement. And 110% requirement, which is the people that have loaned us money for tanks, that they require us to keep money to pay off that loan in there. So our actual money in the bank, of course, is close to 800,000, but by the time you take the reserves out, we're negative 200,000 in the water fund. And that's to date. Now, money's flowing in at the same time money's flowing out, but there just is not the money in there to do any really large capital projects at this point. So the sewer fund is actually in worse shape. It has a net available reserve of a negative $91,055. So it also has a 25% minimum reserve. It doesn't have a 110% reserve on the loan that we're doing. But the sewer fund has $530,000 sitting in there that cannot be used for operations and maintenance. It can only be used for capital projects, and it had to do with the sale of the Devaney property and all the rest of that. So we do have money in there, but it's really limited as to what we can do with it. So the actual money that's available for you guys to be like fixing things and stuff down there is negative at the moment. But, so the question is, where did this money go, right? So where the money went was water, sewer, and trash payment to employees was over $500,000. You guys probably didn't realize you're being paid that well.
I'm sorry. Like through this year alone?
Pardon?
From the beginning of this year to now?
Yeah, this was the $560,000 that was paid out. That is audited fiscal year 2021. I don't have the 2022 to date. I'm looking at the totals for 2021. The other numbers I gave you are 2022 to date. Okay, that's real money that we have in the bank right now.
Is that benefits included?
The end of May.
Is that benefits included? Or is that just salary?
Yeah, that'd be benefits. The problem is that some of the administration can be billed against the water fund. For example, if the clerk is doing water bills, she can be charged against it. Bookkeepers doing bookkeeping on water, that can be charged against it. The town administrator does some town administrator stuff, that can be charged against it. But no matter how you look at it, it's done that up to $527,000 for last year. So that's a leak point. The next thing I need to do is chase this down and see exactly how that breaks out. Where did the money go? Which departments got it? Who got it? So.
Is that contractors too? Is that
No, that's separate.
That's just
Payments to suppliers for 2021 was $560,278. So it's about the same, the payments to employees as payments to suppliers. So, and then last year we got, we sold $1.8 million worth of water, and sewer and trash, all three of those added together. They go in the fund in bulk, so I can break it out, but I don't have it right now. So I need to go in and find out where that money went and stop the leak, because if we go and raise the rates and there's a hole in the bottom of the financial bucket, it's not going to solve any problems at all. It'll leak out, be gone, just like that. Money flows faster than water, guarantee you. So that's my job. And that's part of, like, when I talked about, I thought, how does the Water Sewer Trash Committee, comprised of 2 trustees, interface with you guys? How do we click together? And you're actually working on one part of the problem, which is the actual physical part, the real part, the part that matters, but also money matters. And so my focus is going to be, and I guess Thomas Marco's not here, but we're a team, and we're going to be working on the money issue, because without that we can't do anything. And even if we want to go for grants, we have to have matching funds. So that's going to be one of the main things we're going to be doing.
And we may have I just was on a call at noon. Colorado River District is offering to help. They have a special program to help get some of that matching money as well.
That'd be good, yeah, if you can.
They have a couple, $3 million available, so that's a whole nother, they're trying to help people get this federal money and then help add in some of the matching. So again, we have the ability to get some grants, but we just have to know exactly what it is we're putting in for. So that's. Mike, hang on, Mike. Let me let Mike talk, and then you're next.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One thing, when you're talking about grants, getting grants is never an easy thing. And the people that you're talking, the grantors, I guess it would be, I guess we would be the grantee. Mm-hmm. They're going to want to see a very detailed plan on exactly how you're going to accomplish all of that. And all the engineering work that you've got people working on, that's extremely important. And those have to be in those proposals of, we had so-and-so engineering do this, and this is the preliminary plan, and we're asking for money to turn it into a manufacturable plan.
Fortunately, they might, some of these will help pay for engineering too.
Yeah, that's.
So we're not, there's money to be had, and there's a lot of it, and they really want the Western Slope to get some of it. So we have some people in our court, but again, we have to be organized.
Yeah, so we've been working on that asset management plan with the Colorado Rural Water Association, and maybe you and Thomas should come to those meetings.
When's
next time Scott Thomas is around? It's probably this week. I'll have to follow up with him as soon as next time he's coming out. And then JDS has got a grant to do some capital improvement planning with us too. So we can just have everyone in the same room at the same time. Mm-hmm. Get more done that way.
I'll welcome any money I can give.
Question.
Phil? Let me let Phil talk, and then you, Bill. Go ahead, Phil.
Okay, so I've been involved in grants and loans, and at the end of the day, in many water meetings like this, the conversation goes, well, let's get some grant money to do that. And I think, Paige, you just said there's a lot of grant money out there. Most of the grant money out there right now is for lead and copper abatement, by and large, and hopefully some of that will trickle down later. But at the end of the day, we had DOLA do a rate structure, and I think you have to face the really hard music about whether you're charging enough for your water or not. As politicians, the third rail of politics is you don't want to raise rates on the water. The diesel fuel costs $6 a gallon now, and water costs 10 cents a gallon. So the question, and I believe in that rate study, they suggested that the town was undercharging for water. So to Dave's point, if there's a leaky bucket on the bottom, you can patch the leak, but you still need to increase your money inflows on the top. And I think, unfortunately, at the end of the day, you're going to have to look seriously at rate structures. And also, Mike, the question is whether we're charging enough for outside users for the water. I mean, people, for example, like German Creek, we simply purchase water, take care of our own infrastructure. But the question is whether those purchasers of outside water are contributing anything with their rate structure to helping build the infrastructure. My personal view is we're probably undercharging those 27 people that are purchasing water. That's a hard decision. So at the end of the day, you have to set your rate to pay your bills, irregardless of whether you can go to the altar of grants and loans, get what you need. And I think you're going to have to face that music at some point, and I think it's going to come sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I'll just add that there was a rate study done for drinking water last year, and the new rates are reflected in that, the Royal RCAC, I can't remember what that acronym means. And there is a sewer rate study going on as we speak. I just don't know the details of it. So yeah, but I think we have to look at everything.
Yeah.
So, and Bill had his hand up, and then I'll turn it back to you, Dave. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Phil, when we've had to raise rates before, we always kept a base rate as low as possible for people on fixed income and then hammered the upper users, the ones that were using the most water. The advantage of that is that if people are out there running multiple houses off of a single tap, they'll find their water rates go up dramatically as their usage goes up. It's not linear, but it's exponential.
Sure.
Bill?
Yeah, the rate study recommended, and the board, my memory is, went with the suggestion to raise the base rate, not the gallon rate. So I think you might want to look into that. And I think it should be the other way.
We got that from DOLA before.
Right, but like I'm saying, they went through this rate study, the guy presented it, and they raised the rate, but they raised the base rate more than the gallon.
Yeah, and I think they raised
They changed the focus.
Yeah.
But the question that I had before was, this business of the deficit of the water fund, the money, I don't understand why the administrator didn't bring this forward sooner, and how does this interface with the audit? How could this be a surprise?
I even before I got on board, I knew that this was happening. Wrote some letters to people on the board pointing out, that was at the last budget, last year's budget. I went through all 200 pages of the budget and added it up and saw where the leakage was into personnel.
Right, I mean, you're paying wages out of it.
Well, here's what Tom will say, and I don't know about the law. I thought the money in the enterprise fund was sacrosanct, could only be touched but it isn't. It can bleed one way. Evidently, there's a loophole in the enterprise fund law that allows general fund to take all the money they want out of the enterprise fund, but it can't go the other direction. That's what Tom will said. So we can't have the general fund replenish the enterprise fund. And it's
there's a bunch of stuff there. You can loan the enterprise fund anything you want for any interest rate you want. But like I say, the town's de-bruised. That rationale for having that fund is to fund.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's actually a negative. At one point, I actually thought of some small advantage to keeping it, but I can't remember what it was, and nobody's ever suggested one that holds up to scrutiny. If you didn't have that enterprise fund anymore, then there's no constraint on money you could defeat it. But the point that I was curious about is, how could this be a surprise to the town's budgeting structure that these funds are depleted when we go through audits and we have an administrator that takes care of this stuff? That's my question. How could that happen?
That's a good question, and the buck stops with the trustees. Right? I mean, they should have caught the trustees.
No,
You got
the administrator should have caught it.
Yeah,
Trustees
but
are amateurs.
oversight of the administrator
Trustees are amateurs.
and the mayor
Let's
is
just
are
leave
the
it
trustees.
that we've been asking for some budget information, so
Yeah.
we're gonna be starting to get it.
We're
So-
chasing this
I
down.
think there's some
And
responsibility
Dave and I are now
to
on the
be-
finance committee, so,
looked at here, but beyond the trustees.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing this in, because I agree that we need to find the leaks, monetarily as well. But this is the water committee I came to hear. We were just about talking about, if we were to go to grants and ask for grants, what would we be going for? And that was my interest, is like the physical plant. It's like, okay, how are we going to be working on the physical plant? Understood that the finances have to get worked out at their end, but I personally was really excited to go into that part of the conversation, and then we're over here now, and so I'm just trying to point that out.
well, and unfortunately, I'm not sure exactly what we're gonna go for grants for. I know,
But we
so,
were starting to talk about, when you were talking
but
about.
we won't be
physical-
deciding that here.
No,
Okay.
not deciding.
Yeah.
But we were starting in on that conversation about okay, we know we have all these bits and pieces, and now let's start to tease it apart about at what end are we going to start undoing this knot? We know that we have knots in the system all over the place, and you guys were just about starting to talk about that.
Well, we probably
Yeah.
won't untie the knots tonight
Understood,
either. But
understood.
that, it will
Sorry.
have to be done because these grants, a lot of the cycle have to be decided really soon.
Yep.
So I'm meeting with the mayor tomorrow to go over some of this, and then fortunately, I learned today Colorado River District is offering help and assistance for people, municipalities like us, to get ourselves together, to figure out exactly what we're going for what.
But I was listening, you guys had hashed that, all of us got pretty much on the same page, about 2-inch line, an 8-inch line, and how long the chlorine had to be, and all that contact stuff, and so, where are the top 5 scenarios that you might be, I'm just like throwing.
Well, there's one I could say right now is definitely need to reline the 2 million gallon tank. And Phil pointed out there might be like lead money, so that's something we could tap. So that's one grant that we need to chase right there.
I'm hearing, what's the capital improvement plan? That's what I'm hearing, what you're saying, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's definitely getting, if I may interject, it's like
Yes,
definitely getting
please.
the clock plant back online.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Addressing the PRVs.
Do you know what those are?
Yeah.
Can you explain what that?
Pressure.
Yeah, pressure reducing valves, and that way, and there's 1 volt, absolutely, it needs to be overhauled because it's like super corrosive and you can just tell the drain, like water's just draining into the volt instead of away from it. So, so PRVs, getting the clock back online. We have this, we have undeveloped springs that we need to develop, and if it looks like just putting a bucket in the ground and putting a fence around it, we need to do that. We need to stake a claim on those springs. There's plenty of projects in the spring system, like unused springs that could be
Gathered.
basically gathered and plumbed to where they need to go so that the clock plant is getting more watered. I mean, I could keep going, but it's like I'm hearing the priority keeps coming up that we need to reline the 2 million gallon tank. So it's like one step at a time. I would propose you guys go back to the trustees and let me do an ArcGIS presentation from the headwaters down to wastewater. I can literally do
I
that.
love maps.
What's that?
I love maps. I hate when people are talking about stuff and you're like,
And,
just show me
and some of the stuff we
everything.
can't make public information because it puts our whole system at risk. So it'd be like we could
Well,
do.
maybe not very detailed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But anyway, how these things all hook up and what's, doing the upper and what's doing the lower.
Right.
And the other thing that I heard was Phil had said that the vendor list had gone out there, and I know that there's RFPs out there, and, you know, so, you know, finding out how much, so you can fill in some numbers and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so for the PRVs we have numbers, and then part of the agenda tonight was to at least come up with a committee to look at what it would cost to either get a tank or not get a tank. Do we need a tank? I personally would love if this happened weekly, so that we can actually get stuff done, you know, and have meetings outside of this. And yeah, I motion for that. Like this committee actually meet weekly, and we just you know, there's a lot of top level planning that needs to be done. Like I can tell you all the things that need to be done on the ground, but it has to go in tandem with the CIP.
Yep, and I so agree, and I've been asking for a special meeting, but I'm not even sure a special meeting of entire trustees is a good way to go, as much as
Just a
keep
committee.
it small and get as much information in front of us and Thomas
So you
and
can
the public.
paint a picture when,
Right.
when it's time.
Because I think in ArcGIS map that you can show what's there. Because we have a study, JDS Hydro has a bunch of information. If y'all, it's on the webpage, I think, to be read, and maybe not.
JDS is not public,
But anyway,
SGM's is.
and that's the only way I know a little bit about what's going on is from that study, and I can tell you more
I
about
have a
it.
hard time even finding
I know.
this committee meeting.
Right,
in place.
agreed. But I can get with you and get your email address and send it to
Okay,
you.
great.
So can you guys bring the 1 million gallon tank up without a grant? I mean, do you think?
Well, you see, we don't have any money, so.
I know, you don't have
We
any
have
money.
to spend money
We'll
to
make,
get it
but
online.
some things, if I'm gonna make money appear out of nowhere, I
Yeah.
gotta know that I think is a priority.
Yeah,
What do you
haven't-
guys feel? I mean, obviously, you're not gonna know the status of the tank until you're really in working with it, right?
I mean, the
Same
tank
with
is
the
fine.
plant.
The,
We don't know what's gonna happen with the plant until we start running it.
And
Right.
yeah, and it's like some plumbing fixes, which I don't think is going to be a lot of money. So I got a quote from Brownsville Engineering to go through the Paul and the SCADA system, because there's a lot of like communication errors. There's just like a lot of electrical issues. Maybe there was condensation that, you know, destroyed some of the instruments. And it's like, we have enough things, so let's pay, you know, let's not like just give an engineer a blank check, but be very strategic and hang out with them and learn and make sure that the money's getting spent wisely on the things. And I have a list of things that, and yeah, I have a list for you guys.
Do you have costs with it, or do we still need to
So
get
I have a quote for 2 days worth of work from Brownsville Engineering that was like, I don't know, $3,600. And then there's going to be, you know, a little more work to get all of our analyzers calibrated and verify that the SCADA system is reading accurately. And then it's just Jordan and I doing plumbing stuff after that, you know. So let's get the electrical and the software stuff dealt with by an engineer.
If you're gonna ballpark it, and I'm not gonna hold you to it, but, so, which order of magnitude? 10 to the 5th, 10 to the 4th, what kind of 10 to the 6th?
Let's say in the tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands,
Yeah,
so
we're not-
between 10 to the 4th and 10 to the 5th. Less than 100,000?
Less than 100, for sure. Probably less than 50.
And I won't hold you to that. I need to know a target to start trying
Yeah,
to.
and then and I think there's confusion when I start talking about that storage tank over there. The tank is like a giant swimming pool that was relined, and that looks good. It's the walls and the metal roof over it that we need to look at. Like it's mouse proofed with foam. I don't think that's kosher. We need to like look at that and make sure it's rodent and bird proof. And then there's also they put in, for lack of a better word, like a French drain system to keep the water from the water underneath the tank from getting saturated and causing that and buckling it again. And I think there might be a little bit of work that needs to be done there, because when you look down these tubes, you can see standing water there. I don't think that
It's
project
not
is
draining.
finished. It's not going down to German Creek yet.
And this is 1 million you're talking.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and then that whole like, okay, we have to drain the tank, fill it, and drain it again. We need a neutralizing system to deal with the chlorine before we can put it into German Creek. And the cost of that is like, I don't know. Corinne put out an RFP for engineering services, and that'll be one of the things they're going to have to look at.
With that, is that something we could just lease while we do it, or is it something you think?
I think
is
so.
permanent?
We might even be able to figure out a way to like reverse the flow into the plant where we already have a neutralizing tank and a drain.
Yeah.
Instead of
You
building,
have to pump it back through the
yeah,
plant.
yeah, like, and I don't know, that could just look like a gas-powered pump, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why not. I don't, you know.
We have one. We're forever pumping that.
Let me just, Christina had a question?
Thanks. I just wanted to say thank you both for doing such a great job. You're working so hard, and really thank you. And for being so communicative and transparent. And number one, I really liked that whole matrix, if you will, that whole spreadsheet you were doing. And is that how you're keeping up with everything?
I hate that.
Oh, you do?
I didn't create
the
that.
colors
but
are
like,
a little bit like
everybody says
intense.
that, whatever.
Okay.
That was the only way to say this is done and this is not
Okay.
done. But yeah, most of that entire list is pretty much done. So it's like
Okay.
it's almost irrelevant for me now. It's like, and then like I don't know. I just don't have time after work to actually like, you know.
Right. Okay. And,
I would like that time.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
I really would. But
So also, with regards to budget season coming, and I know like sort of the protocol is for whoever, the administrator, Cindy, to come to the department heads and you all bring back like a list of what it is that you need and the actual costs, which reminded me when you asked that. So is that what you guys are formulating now? Like,
so my understanding is July we're gonna start that. Like
Okay.
what I would love to do with the committee is like, here are the things. Can we get the numbers for these? Because like when I used to get numbers for this stuff, that was like things were like 100% cheaper, you know. So it's like it's like let's just do that together. Let's find the vendors that we're gonna use, and then have a phone call with them. Be like, what's it cost for pipe right now? What is this valve? And then come up with like a spreadsheet, and we can just reference that. You know, because I don't like doing things over and over and over. You know, like these implement systems.
yeah.
Good question.
Go ahead, Bill.
So, a couple of things. I'd like to go backwards a little bit and talk about the relining bids. So we're talking about money issues. There is a lot of money coming down the pipeline for lead. We have a lead issue at the 2 million gallon tank. And after a couple of months of looking, we still don't have any bids. And I don't know, Jeremiah, if we've had any inspections. I mean, has anybody showed up to give us some idea of what's going on? My question, as a response to that, is, why not? I continue to have some issues about who really is in charge. But when we make recommendations, and I'll just ask Jeremiah and George straight out, who do you think your boss is in this situation? Is it the Public Works Director? Is it Corinne? Is it the committee? I mean, who do you view as your boss?
All of them, I guess.
Yeah, we're taking feedback from you and then getting direction from. So a big issue that we're having is like Public Works is understaffed. Period. Like I'm staying focused on water, like just staying on it, and then Jordan has to help Public Works with other things. So it's like yeah.
So my point is that somebody has to dog this. The SRF funding grant cycle is going to end in about 3 days. I understand, and those grants, I mean, they're grants and loans, but it can be as little as 1%. I mean, if we're looking at probably $1 million cost for relining the $2 million tank. But somebody in this organization needs to get on this. We need to have some bids. We need to have an idea what it's going to cost us to do it. We might need to have JD Hydro do a little bit of work for us on contact time for chlorine. I mean, I go to these meetings every month and we make recommendation and nothing happens. So
yeah,
my question is, who in the administration, and it appears that the administration is a leaky hole on Weber's bucket. I mean, we need to get moving on this stuff. So, my view.
Yeah, I often will sit there and go, can I talk to this engineer right now, or do we not? Am I going to get scolded for the engineer charging the town for this conversation that I need to have? So like, yeah, I would like some more clarity too. I would like to know what is okay, what conversation is okay for me to have with engineers, you know? And something that you guys have to understand is like, we're just like, okay, so today, my whole day was doing backflow prevention inspections and just like getting all these other things that should have been dialed in. So keeping us compliant, you know? So, I don't know. I don't know where to go. I don't know. I want to turn to a committee and have a conversation. That's what
Thomas and I just, obviously, you know, in this structure, Corinne's technically your boss. I don't know how Corey fits into the mix with you guys, because Public Works got split into 2 departments in order to make life easy for Travis. Wasn't that functional. It was
But there's
better
no
to have
director for
one.
that. There is no director for that department, so they're
I
really
know.
looking for.
So you guys are it, but for a lot of the practice, Corinne's overloaded. She's trying to do 2 jobs at once, right? No human can do that. So you can come to us if you've got things that you need, and we'll try to chase them down. This, what Phil's talking about, this whole RFP thing, we've got to get going on it. So my task list right here is to sit down with Corinne, see where we're at on RFPs for that stuff, and whether, you know, who we can assign to start doing the paperwork side of getting the money. So Jordan, what do you do in addition to water? What's pulling you off of your primary tasks?
So a lot of it, I'm still available. Like while he was out today, I still got to the plants and got them ran. A lot of it isn't even so much of them needing help with it, it's knowledge of it, because I was in Public Works before transitioning to this. And this week has been free dump week. That's pretty strenuous on everybody, so I went ahead and jumped on trash today to help them out. Otherwise, it becomes a very long ordeal. And the 4th of July is coming up, so.
So if you're going to add, like Jeremiah says, you're understaffed in Public Works, how far are you understaffed? How many people in order to make things sane, what do you need for bodies?
I don't even have an estimate for that. At least 2 more, probably.
And Public Works is fully staffed based on what was budgeted. Public Utilities has 3 positions.
Oh, okay.
And you are not being called Public Utilities? I think there's some misnomer there in terms of the budgeting. But there's a Public Utilities Director, which was never filled, and I think that money is being used to pay for things. So I don't even know if there's budget to hire a Public Utilities Director, and that's what I'm
I just
trying to
assume
find out.
too many directors spoil the broth. I just assume have
Right, but that's what was budgeted.
it
That's what I'm
merged,
telling you.
and then
I'll have to.
these guys focused without a lot of other stuff distracted.
Right. But that's a Corinne discussion. So
It is. I gotta
you
talk
need
to her about it.
Well, and I'd like to be there too,
Okay.
as finance,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a big
That
question.
probably, yeah, it would be a finance issue. It's
Yeah.
both water and finance.
Right.
Okay.
But I have questions about how the filling of jobs has been done.
So on the water side of life, are the 2 of you on top of it, or do you feel overwhelmed?
Depends on the day.
If you average it out,
Not particularly, I don't think.
you think it's okay?
I think we've been doing all right. I'm sure he's felt a little bit overwhelmed with this backflow thing coming up because they were tracking down where they were. There wasn't, I guess, a very good list of necessarily where they were going to be. So he's had to call a bunch of people to figure out where it even was located on their property.
So you didn't have a good monitoring schedule. You didn't inherit a good monitoring set of guidelines that you had to kind of.
Well, okay, hold on. We did lead and copper, which is according to the state. So I did lead and copper, consumer confidence report, and backflow inspections like in the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
So that's why I don't have
Understood.
That's why I haven't called contractors for estimates.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
The consumer credit and lead and copper kind of surprised us because we had thought the lead and copper had been done before we joined.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't.
Yeah. And then that whole thing, like every time I talk to the state, they go, "Wow, your system is really weird. We need to fix this." You know, like we should have 40 testing sites for lead and copper. We were required to do 20, and we only had 20 sites. But yeah, we have 139 tier 1 sites. So they're like, okay, we really have to overhaul this whole thing. So like, yeah, so we're working out all those kinks in addition to like talking with the state about an asset management plan and capital improvement plan. It's like,
So you're going big, you're going little, you're going big, you're going little.
yeah.
Yes.
I like to just stay focused on like, you know. So, you know, if we had a third person that we could delegate out to, that would be huge. That would be so much. Then I could say, hey, go around with this inspector today, take them to all these sites, you know, learn this thing, and yeah, free up more time.
Thank you. Phil?
I'm trying not to complain. I'm not.
I know, no, but that's
Doesn't
reality.
sound-
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Phil, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I had a question for Jeremiah. Were all those, how many, you have, what do we have, about 900 taps? How many taps are in town? 900,000?
900, somewhere like that.
900. So you have 122 tier 1 LCR taps,
30,
which is more than 10%, which is pretty high. Do you have any idea how they determined those were tier 1 sites? Were they actual inspections? Were they
I don't know.
surveys sent to homeowners? I mean, I dealt with lead and copper quite a bit. One of the things is that I'm wondering how accurate those are. And you can go back, by the way, and change from tier 1 to tier 3 based on
Phil,
an actual physical inspection.
Phil, I'm going to interrupt you and ask you maybe if you and Jeremiah could follow up on this.
We can do this another time.
Only because it's 6:14, and I don't know if Dave has had an opportunity to do any clarification on the previous. If you were ready to do that, Dave, I didn't know if you were.
I'll talk to him.
Okay,
I
thanks,
think
Phil.
we covered this stuff today.
Well, you mentioned.
Part was like the 2-inch line.
Yeah, okay.
Like so.
So there wasn't much else in here that needed a little correction? Okay, because that was just one of the ones I wanted to make sure we got to that.
I do want to point out that what you guys are dealing with now is more complicated than it was 10 years ago. The state has really ramped up what you got to do. And yet, we're not any more complicated as a town, in other words. That's why I think staffing is an issue. We've got to look into it.
Yep, agreed. So did you get any of those brochures from Thomas?
No.
You didn't, okay. Because there were some brochures that talked about other kinds of tanks that Phil had gotten when he went to the Rural Water Association convention, and Thomas has those. But at this point, I just don't know if we need to simply, if we could get the 1 million running and we could learn about chlorine contact time, could we start on the 2 million gallon tank without adding another source to provide water to the upper users?
Yeah, I believe so. We would get clocked back online, supply most of the town, and then we talk to CDPHE and SGM to come up with an engineered plan to use the distribution line as our contact chlorine time for Hidden Valley and Lamborn Mesa.
Okay, thank you.
So I do have one question for you guys. Do we have the ability to fix our own lines, or are we contracting every bit of it out?
No, we've been fixing our own.
So it isn't just Rue doing it for us, we have the ability to...
Yeah, the one thing he does do is sewer, because we literally don't have a backhoe that can reach that far
fix it.
down.
Yeah. Some of those are incredibly deep.
Yeah.
And that's very time intensive, and
24 feet.
if we put our entire public works crew working on that sewer, we're not accomplishing anything else, and it can't be done between just 2 people.
And I want to interject that Roop has been hired a lot to deal with in-town leaks. That's all Roop's been doing. I mean, Roop, and one time we had Kendall's, but they have been fixing the leaks that we've had on Rio Grande, on 3rd, so that has not been in-house.
That was before we started here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to bring that all back in-house. Not only is it cheaper, but it's just nice to have the skills on tap.
And sometimes it's like, it's residents that are hiring them, and it looks like the fire department, when the fire department.
Yeah,
put
no,
that line-
I have all the invoices from Root.
Okay,
They've
great.
been doing a lot. And
Yeah.
I just don't know if, does the town have the ability to, get in there and,
He
First of all-
has 6 full-time guys.
right. So it's really, I think it's hard, Dave, right now for town employees to do it if they're already
I agree.
overstaffed.
I'm thinking, well, obviously we need more staffing, that's
Yeah.
part, if I'm an AIM staffing, I'd also like to bring the talent in to do it all ourselves as
Yeah.
much as we can.
Heck yeah,
Yeah.
let's do it. Like we have, at least 2 really competent operators and a few other guys that would be like, no problem, up to speed in no time.
Yeah,
So for
just a matter
operating
of having
equipment.
the
We go
bandwidth
into
to do it.
budgeting, and seriously in August, so that's why I need to meet with you guys and figure out where we're at, so we can, plan for how much money you're gonna need to get your job done.
Definitely, but the reason I was asking about if we can get the distribution line, that to me is key. If the distribution line can be used for sanitation, we can get postponed unless there's money so available to get a second tank over the 2 million.
Okay,
Is that a
so
long-term goal though? Is
No,
that
not
Yes, it's been a long-term goal for 20 years.
I mean, it could serve 2 purposes if you can't use the distribution line to get to the upper users. I mean, that was the thought.
Yeah, but if you look at the price tag on a 2 million gallon tank, it's gonna freak you out.
Yeah, well, and the thought was, there are some glass line tanks that you can make bigger.
Yeah.
And that's some of the brochures that Thomas has that Phil got. So the discussion, previously, kind of during the 1 million tank tour, was even a 1 million gallon tank might serve as redundancy up there in the future. But if we don't need it now, we just need to get the 2 million line to give everybody water.
But what a better time than now, because then we take away having to do all the engineering for contact time, because we know we have it.
It depends on the money. What's it take? And that's why I was wondering about the 2-inch line. If we had to put in a new line to get to the
No,
1
we wouldn't
million,
be able to
but
afford it.
we don't have to. So one of the things, the boards of trustees made a motion that this committee was going to do a cost comparison about relining the 2 million and what it would take to buy a second tank to put in up there. I just wrote 2 million on here, but it's a range because of the potential for future redundancy up there. But I just don't know if that is worth spending time on at this point, unless we can get a really good grant to buy a second tank. But we wouldn't have it for a few years.
We're pushing out to next year for
Yep.
relining and
Oh, everything.
everything.
Right.
Everything except this 1 million gallon tank, and then, budgeting for staffing for you guys and trying to stop the leaks.
Well, we can't get a grant for the budget, for the staffing, so that's why I'm meeting with Mary tomorrow at 12:30.
Yeah.
So I wanna be able to report something to her that's definitive. So it sounds to me like if we can get money for relining the 2 million, there's definitely lead abatement money out there. So that's for sure. And I don't know if we would need there's grants for meters potentially, that's not priority, but there might be money for that in the future. But there might be money to help get the 1 million up and running as well. We just don't know what that's gonna cost.
That's something that, twice I've had money budgeted for meters on the springs, and twice it never flew.
Okay,
The director of public works just stalled on it. So, you guys know that, at least at the collection points in the springs, we really gotta know what the
Yep.
water going in the pipe is, so we know what comes out, so we know what's leaking. We have no quantification at all of the leakage from the springs down to the treatment plant. We've got good data from the treatment plant down to the meters in the house, but we could be losing half our water coming down from the springs for all I know.
we have been on the pipeline roads, and we were looking for seepage and not seeing any.
Mhm.
So if that's, I hear what you're saying, and we're being cognizant of the possibility of leaks.
Yeah, because there is a possibility that they're leaking now because they're not extremely pressurized like we would have in town, so.
So why don't you put that when you talk to Mary, what about,
Yeah.
meter in the springs, let's bring that.
yeah,
back
because
up.
I was just looking through, I can't remember which one, but one of potential is meters. I think through.
But
a
meter
state
in the
grant.
springs.
Yeah, meter in the springs, exactly, so there could be money for that too. And if it is available, even though it's not be top priority. It'd be good if we get the money to get it. Okay, so mostly I'm thinking at this, well, maybe it might be good to do a cost comparison, but it depends on how much money's out there and if they consider this storage. The way they describe some of these grants, they make it sound like it's reservoirs, you know, in the ground, not necessarily man-made storage. So I have to find that out. But if there's money for that, I say we try for it too. So I just don't know yet. So those, but I feel like I know what to sit down with her and talk about. But we don't have any new costs for new bids for the relining of the 2 million. We were bouncing around. 1.2 was being talked about last year. 1.2 million to get it all done, but I don't know how accurate that is. You haven't heard either, have you? Well, with all the lead paint abatement, it was going to be more like 750 for the lining until they learned about the lead paint. Then that almost doubled it.
That was from last year.
Yeah.
If you went out and got a bid right now, it's going to cost almost double.
Yeah. So we have to find that out. And Christina had a
Sorry.
Yeah. No.
Quick question about the pressure relief valves, vaults. Like, is that all tied up, or that's not done yet? All those, or those 9 vaults?
Yeah, so it looks like 2 of them just need a little bypass installed. Some of them just need, you know, a few $100s worth of like repair parts, and then there's 1 vault that's going to be the expensive one.
Expensive one.
Yeah.
You know which?
It's the one on. I keep mixing up Miller Creek and Dry Gulch. That's what I thought. Dry Gulch.
Miller Vault?
No, it's Dry Gulch. So
Dry
but
Gulch.
if you look at that, they mixed up Dry Gulch and Miller Vault.
Oh.
So flip those.
Really?
Yeah.
So Miller Vault is Dry Gulch.
Yeah. And so read what they have for.
It says 6-inch, 90-something PRV, 4-inch manual bypass, no PRV, replace
That-
6-inch valve.
That's the one that's super
It's
corroded. There's no
installed,
bottom.
yeah.
That's gonna be the expensive one, and it services like Minnesota Creek mostly and Hidden Valley.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's sort of the priority first before the 1 million gallon operating up and running and serving town to connect the 2 million.
I mean, they're kind of going in tandem. Like that bolt, we're gonna have JDS do like drawing sets. I think we're gonna do that. Maybe we don't need to do that. Like, and then probably just have a contractor put that one in. One liability insurance would be great, right? And then we can work on the clock plan.
It's almost simultaneous, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the nature of it. Everything in parallel.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna tap, do you think we could get money for spring development?
I'm not sure I've seen source control in any of these yet, but it's possible.
You know, we've been through the whole reservoir thing multiple times, and there are no good reservoir sites, period. The very first, I don't know how many water studies I've seen, but the very first one I got a handle on was really good. It talked about a full survey of all the various places we could put a reservoir, and it came to the conclusion like none. It just wasn't. One of the problems with sharing a reservoir with an agricultural user, like we had thought with Lone Cabin, is that agricultural users run them empty at the end of their growing season, and that's right when we need it. So whenever the recommendation from the first water study was that we do not share a reservoir with an agricultural user.
And I'm so curious. I keep hearing like, oh, storage is going to help us during the low flow, but it's like, okay, if, say we put in a 1 million gallon tank, we use 450,000 gallons a day.
Right.
It only gives us 2 days. So
I know.
like, why storage?
No, storage would have to be, I agree totally, and I presented that years ago, that you're only buying a little tiny window at a time.
Right, but we need to like float us for months. So really we should be spending money on spring development.
We should, spring development, if there's no reservoir sites, because when you're talking about storage, you need acre feet, you don't need millions of gallons. And the only way you're gonna pull that off, you're right, is improve the springs, improve the distribution lines from the springs to the treatment plant.
Yeah.
We do that. I think we have tons of water.
Yeah.
That's my feeling of having backpacked all that.
Oh, yeah.
Is that we have a huge amount of water. It's just pissed away before it gets down to the home meter.
What would even a reservoir do to our water? Like,
Quality of drought.
Yeah.
You've tasted Hotchkiss water, right? And you've tasted Paonia water. There's a difference. The Hotchkiss water comes out of reservoir. It's LaRue Creek water. It's surface water, and so the quality won't be as good. We're running spring water now. I know that the state says spring under the influence of groundwater under the influence of surface water, spring water, but it really is sweet water, and I'd like to keep it that way. In other words, in order to get quantity, never sacrifice quality, or you'll regret it. Payoff just doesn't work.
Can we drill wells into that Minnesota underground, aquifer system that you were talking about? If we need quantity, can we get it there?
Yeah, I don't know what kind of quantities are under there or not. There are some undeveloped springs that I know about. One of them's really big, and it comes out of a field on the northwest side of Coal Mountain. And there's that big chute there that gathers a lot of snow, and since it's towards the north, it holds snow along. And even in 2003, I've got pictures of that spring, and it was just like gushing like crazy. So we might want to look into acquisitions. Obviously somebody owns that water. Somebody owns every drop of water multiple times in Colorado. But we've tried to buy water before. We tried to buy some water that eventually was grabbed by Crawford Domestic Water Association. So I think we should always be on the alert for grabbing water rights. One of the other things we did was that if somebody wants to build a big subdivision in this town, they have to show up with raw water rights equal to what their demand is. Now those water rights will typically just be ditch water, but one of my dreams is always to use ditch water more aggressively in town. I could talk about it. In other words, instead of having everybody water their yards with prime spring water, having water and ditch water. There's numerous hurdles to getting that done, so I kept hitting it. That's always been a dream.
Let me interject 1 second. Mike had a question. You still? Oh, never mind.
Phil, you've been unmuted this whole time, so you can interject anytime.
I need to talk to you for a second.
Oh.
Okay. We wrap.
Let me just ask one last thing. So in terms of if we could get grants for springs, correct me if I'm wrong, probably the priority would be to get all the springs we do have control over, maximize, and as opposed to looking for new rights.
Yeah, no, we
We're
need to
better
work
off
with
getting
what
what we have, make sure we have is clearly managed, it's metered, it's piped.
That's what I wanted with that ArcGIS presentation. I want to show you guys what's undeveloped, where we have clogs. That's low-hanging fruit. Unclogged 20 foot of pipe, low-hanging fruit.
Right, and I would love to see that on a map. I keep saying, we need maps, it's so hard. Was that Phil?
Yeah, that's good. So I've got a couple comments on what Dave said. Number one, we have a I'm a big GIS guy. We have a very good GIS platform currently for asset management that's been developed by, SGM. One of the things that we don't have, GIS is a very good representation of our spring culture up on the side of the mountain. One of the things I think we should focus on this summer is trying to accuratize, and unfortunately using your cell phone for GPS coordinates is not very accurate. And one of the things we might consider is getting some assistance to accurately map those springs. There's a lot of pipes on the ground up there. I haven't been up there, and Dave Weber probably knows that better than anybody. But I think the first thing we need to acquire are some really high quality maps of where the springs are and coordinates for where the water rights are. Second thing is everybody says, well, let's just measure the spring water. Well, it's very difficult. If you've done any engineering, trying to measure low flow water under pressure is very difficult. The best that we're going to be able to do up there probably will be to put some ultrasonic sensors in the flumes that Luke Rescue measures every day. So at the end of the day, we're going to, in terms of actual measurement, we're going to be looking at flume measurements and not individual output from streams. It's a very hostile environment up there, and put low flow measurement devices up there and ask them to sustain the winter is going to be difficult. So my pitch is, GIS. Third item is above surface storage. I've looked at all those documents, and the only obvious reservoir up there is the Rover Reservoir. As Dave pointed out, it's a combined ag reservoir, and there's going to be a whole lot of issues up there regarding who owns what and where it goes. Fourth item is I looked over a lot of the water rights. The town has had some legal opinions about what we own up there and what we don't. But my sense is that when Travis was running things, that the diversions, and there seemed to be a lot of what we would say Kentucky windage sort of agreements up there about who got water and what went where and all that. I think at some point that needs to be defined. I agree with Dave that our best choice is not to build above ground stories. It's extremely expensive. The water lives in those reservoirs, gets exceptionally corrupted by algae, and would increase our water treatment demands quite a bit. So I think my goal is this summer is that we try to define what we got up there, enhance our map. The last item is that it is essential. Our best shot at a grant right now is to get on this tank relining project and get our application in for some lead money, because lead money is out there. And lastly, there really is not any money for spring development. Any spring development money would come out of the Colorado Agriculture of the CWCD, not the CDPHE. Because in many cases, the water rights are actually administered by Colorado Water Conservation Board and not the CDPHE.
Yeah,
so
just so you know, there are some grants coming out of that. I just don't know if they're for springs in particular. There's a lot more money coming from the Colorado River District too, to help.
But those grants are, those grants from the River District are like 40 to 50,000. We're talking about a grant that we need $1 million, $1.2 million. And our best shot at that right now is CDPHE, SRF funding, and LEDB.
No, they're helping. They are adding in, they're doing these accelerator grants to help kind of augment what's coming through the JAIP or whatever it is. Anyway, so there's more attention to trying to make sure that these billions coming into Colorado are getting used on the western slope. So
one of the things that's sort of off topic has to do with pressure. One of these is topic of JP right now. We don't have a very good model for our pressure zones. Pressure is a big problem for what we have to deal with. There is a lot of interest, and there's some money in the fire districts. One of the things that would help us greatly would be to get a fire district grant, have those guys come in and test our hydrants. We might be able to get a better pressure zone analysis.
I know that's in JDS.
Phil, that's in JDS's report. I can show you what they came up with. They actually identified a couple areas that. So basically, the fire marshal wanted the town of Paonia to be able to provide 1,000 gallons a minute to those hydrants, and JDS did an analysis, and pretty much nowhere can we actually achieve that. And there's a couple areas on the system that can only do 300 gallons a minute. There's just two zones. So, and I'll show you that stuff. Also, the spring mapping is pretty complete. We actually used SGM's ArcGIS data to go locate all those springs, and they were spot on. And then I was able to get more layers from the U.S. Forest Department, and I actually added those layers on. So when we had the maps, we didn't have any pipelines, but now we actually have springs and pipelines. So
awesome.
Yeah. They look pretty good, and we even marked up where there's exposed pipe. We didn't get to do the whole thing, but we were able to do a lot of that.
Is ArcGIS dead? Is it online?
Yeah.
Can I get access to it?
I don't know the process, but so the town of Paonia has an account. I don't know if all the Esri data is available online. Some of it's redacted to the public.
Actually, Dave, the Esri data.
Show you.
The Esri data is available online, but what we did with the town was to purchase one license, and Corinne has the access information. We have a public and private information that public information has layers and good stuff in it. The private information has multiple layers of all kinds of goodies in there. So
Yeah, I don't need continuous access. I just wanted to snapshot it.
yeah, exactly.
Good. So yeah, I'll talk to Corinne about that.
One quick question.
Okay, Christina, and then I'll probably wrap it up.
So,
Is that good?
Scott Thomas is coming, you said, this week or something?
Yeah, he said he was going to be here every other week, and I just need to follow up with him and see if
Okay.
he's still coming this week.
And I guess that would be open to the board, the water committee?
I don't see
I
him.
never hear about it.
I would like to hear about him. I would like to meet with him again, but, okay,
Yeah, so I don't know what the protocol is.
okay.
Can ask.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I thought I
There's a little
was.
bit
I
of-
thought I was just. No, I'm just
There's
kidding.
a little
Okay.
bit of arm's length with that appears.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, everybody. Again, a lot of good information, and I feel like I can get with Mary, and she knows a lot more about what's going on behind the scenes with these grants than I do. But I feel like we kind of made a roadmap of sorts with an awful lot of loose ends yet to be found. But thank you
I'm
both.
happy to meet with you guys too.
We're going to be here at 12:30.
Okay.
Yeah, it might. Yeah, Jeremiah, that'd be really good.
And yeah, Mary also mentioned another thing that the state is doing to talk about infrastructure grants that are coming out. That's September 11th. I can't remember what day it is. I think it might be September 11th, but I'm going to see if I can zoom into that one too. Because I feel like it's just,
Was it July 11th?
maybe it's July 11th.
It is. I have
Yeah.
signed up for that as well.
Yeah, because
It's
if I'm sitting there, I'm listening to the grants, and I know it's relevant on the ground. I'm just
Yes.
like, did you see that? You know, did you notice that? You know,
Right.
like, and loop it together for you guys if it's
Yeah.
missed.
Recording stopped.
Oh,